Hello, listener, and welcome back to the Get Better at Recruiting podcast. When we set out on this mission of putting together a podcast that could help the next generation of recruiters, we envisioned it that there would be a small group of very experienced recruiters as the core co-hosts of the podcast, and that over time, some of us might make an episode, some of us might not. If you've ever watched one of my favorite podcasts, The Rewatchables, which is all about movies, you'll see that Bill Simmons, the main host, is predominantly on the episodes, probably 80% of them, but he has a mix of hosts, depending on the topic, come in and out. So there's some mainstays, Sean Fennessy and a couple others who are on frequent episodes, and we're looking to do the same thing. So with that in mind, this episode, you'll be introduced to another core member of our group, good friend of ours, longtime recruiter like Alex and I, been in the business 25 years, the illustrious and friendly and professional and well-respected Sonny Manzo. We're going to have a little bit of a backstory on Sonny, just so you all get to meet Sonny and know what he's all about. And then we're going to talk, the three of us, Alex, Sonny, and I, about what it is that makes a great recruiter. What do you have to do to be successful in this business? What have we learned in our 2 to 3 decades each in this industry? How can we help you understand? Before we move into future episodes where we're getting really deep into particular topics and how to interview and maybe some technical topics if you're in the technical IT space, like what is Java and what's Oracle. Before we get in those, we feel like this is another good foundational building block for your career to understand what are the traits that will make you successful. And also we get very briefly, we never really got to it at the end, get into, some things to not do with your career that may hinder you as you go about this career in recruiting. Again, if you like what you're hearing in our episodes, welcome you to like our podcast, spread the word, subscribe to our podcast. We look at our downloads, look at our subscriptions to see if, we're doing the right things and if you all are enjoying what you're hearing and the content that we're putting out. So like, subscribe, and please spread the word. Let's jump into our latest episode of the Get Better at Recruiting podcast. What is there to think about? So as I was saying, Smartless, Will Forte, Will Arnett,
okay,
Jason Bateman, great podcast. They have a surprise guest every time. Apropos for today, by the way.
Ooh.
Although you're not a guest, you're our friend and you're a host.
I feel very welcome now.
I hope so. But
we've sent enough invitations out, Sonny.
Well, I haven't gotten one in a while. I'm just saying.
Right. So, listener, you probably have heard a new voice here on this episode. That is our good friend, one of my oldest friends, and a really good work friend of mine, Sonny Manzo. Sonny joins Alex and I on today's podcast, and we expect that he'll be a part of many future podcasts as well. Sonny's been in the business for 20-some years?
25 years.
25 years. And he knows his number. So unlike my earlier podcast when I took a guess.
Well, I prepped a little for tonight.
You looked at your LinkedIn profile?
I checked it. I have it up right now, actually.
So today's episode, listener, we're going to get into who is Sonny. So you know how he came to know Alex and I, why he's on the pod. And then also today's topic, which is what does it take to be a good recruiter, to be a successful recruiter? And conversely, what have we seen in our years of not only mentoring, guiding, and managing recruiters? What has made a successful recruiter, but alternatively, what have we seen have been some downfalls, some failures of recruiters, recruiting teams, recruiting managers that we've had an opportunity to work for? But before we jump into the topic, let's introduce Sonny. So Sonny, why don't we start from the beginning? Childhood story, you grew up where, you did what?
The whole thing?
No, not the whole thing.
Jesus.
Fast forward a little bit. Baseball, okay. You're a baseball player?
Yes, I play baseball a lot. Coach it a lot now too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like most people, I fell into this looking for a job. I was 24 years old, 23 years old. Interviewed at Aerotech, which maybe people don't even know Aerotech anymore, right? It's Tech Systems. It was Aerotech when I was there. Recruited engineers. Well, I interviewed there randomly. A friend of a friend got me an interview. Didn't even know what it was. Had no clue what I was getting into. As a matter of fact, after I started, I really had a hard time believing that these very highly educated engineers and PhDs and electrical engineers needed my 23-year-old me to get them a job, right?
Sure.
That's basically what it was back then.
Yep. How was so when you, I don't know, interviewed or found out about Aerotech, what was the position or the career described to you as?
Yeah. Aerotech and Tech Systems, and back then it was Maxim
right?
Group and Onsite and all the old, they had 100 companies back then, right? So Aerotech was engineering, Tech Systems was IT. Maxim was like, I don't know, software programmers that weren't programming machines. That's what we did in Aerotech, right? So I actually originally interviewed for Maxim Group, got a ding call, and then like an hour later got a call from Aerotech to come and interview. And I was like pissed off. Like, I don't want to, you just told me I didn't get the job. And now you want me to come back and interview?
Oh, you got a ding call me. You got a rejection.
I got rejected, yeah. And went, interviewed, kind of pissed off. And I think the guy liked that and hired me. I took it. And then I just had a chip on my shoulder from day one. I was going to kick everybody's ass there. There's a real simple model there. You have salespeople, you have recruiters. Salespeople go find the jobs. Recruiters fill the jobs. You recruit for 6 months to a year. You do great. You get promoted. You become a salesperson. Back then, sales to manage this, manage that office and win a contest and make millions or whatever.
Sure.
I stayed there 3 years, which was like a record, I think, for some people, especially someone starting there as old as I was.
And if I remember right, there was a lot of turnover, a lot of burnout.
When I got hired, they were hiring 100 recruiters a week, and 60 were quitting in the first 6 months. So they were 60% turnover in 6 months.
Okay.
100 a week.
Yep.
I got my offer letter and a plane ticket to Baltimore. Right. Good luck. Go to Baltimore for 2 weeks and train.
Right.
What was the training like, Sonny?
It was awesome. After that, I mean, they stopped doing it while I was still there. They changed it, made it more local, but the training was still really good. They had you on the phone in like 3-4 days. Teach you stuff, put you right on the phone, calling actual people that you'd be calling. It was actually pretty cool. They got you off that fear of the phone real fast. You know, it's a little too rah-rah for me. Again, it's more, so if there was 100 new hires there was 95 fresh grads and me and 4 other people that had a job already before.
Okay. You know, what's interesting is even though tech has been around for a long time, 25, 30 years, whatever that is, I hear the name mentioned multiple times as we have the Aerotech model for training recruiters. Like there are multiple, I don't know what you call it, like offshoots of the tree, people that came through that model, said, it obviously works. Let's go replicate this over and over and over again in our industry. Now, obviously, one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is not everybody's going to go work for Tech Systems. So how do you get trained? How do you figure this out? So that's why we're here. Yep,
absolutely. And you hear that because there's a lot of people that were there when I was there that very few people, I should say, retire from Aerotech, right? You go there and you learn it. And then they used to have some pretty strict rules about how you could network and who you could go to for referrals and stuff like that. You had to stay within the company, which I learned at my next job wasn't a great idea. I can't remember who taught me that, though. I'll have to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember back in the day,
I couldn't call anybody.
Tech people were not allowed to go to like networking events.
Right. So
go to the recruiter socials and no, you guys were on your own little island.
Absolutely. And then
I bet you if LinkedIn was a thing back then, you wouldn't have been allowed on LinkedIn because then
we would have got that. They would have been on top of that because we had everything. I had every tool that it before.
No, not as a tool, but as that networking, branding, personal branding.
Maybe like personal branding.
They probably would have been a big fan of that, right?
It was a machine. It was definitely a machine.
Right.
But so like when I was there, most of the people I worked with after 3, 4, 5, 6 months quit and went and were recruiters other places. I couldn't like work with them, like network with them, pull people from them.
Right.
Or help them. So what ends up happening is you learn it. You get kind of successful. You figure out a few things about the business. You start to see that other people are doing better and different and cooler things within recruiting at other places, and you leave. And that's kind of what happens. And then there's been a lot of people that have started other companies. There's
the laundry list.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They go start their own little staffing agency or RPO or whatever.
Yep. And you were there for 6 years, you said?
3 years.
Oh, 3 years. Sorry,
yeah,
3 years.
It was a record. I recruited for about a year, sold for 2.
Okay. What was I remember back in the day, you guys used to put up big numbers. Like for the listener, at home, like my expectation for my current team is 2 hires a month, 3 hires a month, right? I've heard stories from Jim and others like, oh yeah, we used to hire, we'd have 10 people starting on a Monday, or we'd have 20 people starting on a Monday.
It was a hire a week. So you had to have a hire a week.
Okay. So 4 a month was the extra,
I think when I got promoted, it was like my 60 something week. I had 80 something hires, 90 hires, something like that.
In how many weeks?
60 something.
Okay.
That's how you got promoted, right? You had to,
right.
But here's the other thing you got to remember. I would hire like a drafter, like an AutoCAD drafter, and he would go do a 3-month project. And then he would roll out. I'd put him in the next 3-month project and the next 3-month project and the next 3-month projects. And that's 4 hires in a year. It's the same guy.
Sure.
So that was how we did it.
But that's okay. Redeployment. Yeah. I wish more salespeople were adept at redeployment. And I hear this from multiple staffing firm owners that I network with and sit on roundtables with. They're always like, why can't we ever redeploy that superstar that we had working for us? Like it's just, we always.
So the sales guys are out fishing, not selling.
Right.
Golfing.
Yeah. So you leave tech. Why do you leave tech?
I was done selling, I guess. I mean, it wasn't totally different. I guess the way I described it when I quit, I still remember this. I told my manager, Andy Lovelace, if you're out there and you're listening, I told him I still liked what I was doing, but I was enjoying myself more calling people to offer them a job than calling a guy at a company and asking him for money. That's really what it boiled down.
So you like the recruiting side more than the sales side?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The downside to Aerotech, especially back then, is there was no path. If you didn't go into sales, there was no path. So I left.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever told you the story. Alex, I don't think we talked about this on a previous podcast. We're 4 episodes in. I can't remember what we talked about, but I had a conversation with a recruiter one time. You know him very well, JVD.
Yeah.
And he came to me when I first met him, and I took over a recruiting team, and he was number 10 on a list of 10, right? For performance. And he came to me and we just had a conversation around like, how could we work together to, make him a better recruiter? I said, what do you want to do with your career? And he goes, I want to move into sales. And I said very blatantly, I go, yeah, you're not moving into sales. And he's like, I think my bluntness took him aback a little bit. He said, what do you mean I'm not going into sales? I go, look, the career path is not suck at recruiting and go to sales. The career path is get good at recruiting and maybe you have an opportunity in the sales and other doors open to you. I said, but truthfully, if you and I work collaboratively together, I've been a recruiter for 20, what did we say, Alex? 26 years? I got to check my LinkedIn page again. So, I've been a recruiter the whole time. So I told him, I go, look, what could happen is you could make a very good life for yourself as just a recruiter. I actually had somebody recently ask me, what's the career path for recruiting? I go, you're a recruiter, right? So years from now, you might be a senior recruiter, and years after that, you'd be a super senior recruiter. I mean, and then I had this epiphany is probably the wrong word, but I think about like a cardiovascular surgeon. What is the career path for a cardiovascular surgeon? They're just going to be a cardiovascular surgeon for the rest of their career, but they're just going to get better and better and better at it. So you could be a recruiter without yearning to move into sales or yearning to go do something else. Just be a fantastic friggin' recruiter and you'll do great.
25 years in and super fancy title, and I was setting up interviews for the CEO today.
Right. What's up, Alex?
So question, why do you think that a recruiter who may have struggled in recruiting, which has multiple components, you have to source, you have to schedule, you have to network, you have to read resumes, make sure they're written properly, versus a sales guy, you turn them loose and they're the smile and dial entertainer type of guy. Now, the 3 of us can look back and say, okay, we've been in this market for a long time. We feel comfortable in selling. But what if that guy you're talking about was a better salesman than a recruiter? Right? Like, how did you know that he was not going to be successful in sales?
Truthfully, I don't know that I knew that at the moment. I just knew what I had seen as a career path for recruiters. As we all know, and the listener may not know, lots of recruiters I've seen either stick with recruiting like we have, move into HR. I've had multiple friends decide that, the numbers, and it bleeds over into your off hours, your weekends, sometimes your holidays, recruiting does. Whereas an HR position may just be a 9 to 5, an 8 to 5. And it's an overlap and not a parallel role, but HR is related to recruiting. So some people go to HR. So you're still in the people business, but now you're doing different things. And then some people go to sales. So just in the conversation, I didn't know how good he was or was going to be. He ended up being our number one recruiter. And I brought him to the next company. When I left, I brought him with me, but I didn't know at the time that he could or could not succeed as a salesperson. I just knew he wasn't going to be given that opportunity, certainly within our company where I, took over as the manager, because I already knew the feelings of the owner. He was definitely not giving the number 10 guy on the list an opportunity to go out and knock on doors and work with clients.
Right.
Yeah.
I got you. Okay. Yeah, of course.
All right. So you take off from
I leave Aerotech,
and where do you go next?
Buddy of mine, you may know him, Jim Archuleta, calls me, says, I'm leaving this job. You should come and take it. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, I'm leaving, but I'm leaving for a good reason. I forgot what it was back then.
Yeah.
I think he was going to Technium or something. I don't know where he was going.
I don't know. Yeah, I joke with him. He was there for like a week. He's like, I was there longer than a week. I'm like,
yeah, but look what you got out of it.
That's true.
And that's when I met Noel. Noel hired me at NIMS Associates. A lot of good people there, good run there. Learned tech recruiting, right? It was definitely a different animal than engineering. You had a lot more people, had more personality, a little bit more socially intelligent people, I guess you could say.
Yep.
I had a lot of fun. Started hiring Java people, and that ended up being like my thing for 20 years after that.
Yeah, NIMS was a good situation for all of us. Unfortunately, at some point they got bought by Keen, got bought by NTT, and I think Joe might be the only guy still there from the original.
Joe Kyle's definitely still there.
Yeah. Oh, I know he's still there, but he might be the only one still there from that run. He's been there 30 some years, but
nah.
So and currently you're a VP of recruiting for a cybersecurity firm?
Yeah. I'm the VP Global Talent Acquisition and HR Operations for Devo.
Okay. And that was after a long run at Trustwave, Chicago-based.
Long time at Trustwave, yeah.
So in your, if you had a nugget to pull out over the course of your career,
yeah.
We're going to get to lots of them today in future episodes, but what would you tell the listener at home? What has helped your longevity in this business and your reputation? Everybody I talk to, I'm like, hey, I know Sonny. Like, oh, Sonny's the best. Like, people, you have a good reputation. What's led to that?
I think it touched on this in your first episode about the general public. If you Google what a recruiter is, and people say slimy, dirty, whatever, you get that a lot. And I've always prided myself on being as transparent as I possibly could with candidates, managers, clients, whoever it is. I've worked not just corporate or staffing, but consulting and been a consultant, et cetera. But it's just laying it out there, right? I think early on at Aerotech, I figured out that I could probably talk anybody into any job if I really wanted them to, but it wasn't the way to do it.
Right.
I've had a whole lot more success laying out the facts and telling the story, including some of the downsides to a company or a job or whatever, and let people make their own decisions.
For sure.
And obviously always steering them a little bit here and there, but not trying to fool anybody or trick anybody. And I think that, anything you do, if you act that way, treat people that way, it's going to help your reputation.
Yeah, I've had instances on the recruiting side, and I counsel recruiters who've worked with me. I don't know if we did this back then, but it was, you can tell me the yellow flags. And if there's red flags, you probably shouldn't be talking to that candidate. There probably shouldn't be a reason to move them forward. But if there's yellow flags that we need to be aware of, that the hiring manager needs to be aware of, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But at least we're going into it with eyes wide open. We have all the facts, right? And the same the other way. Like, don't try to tell me this company is the best company that's ever lived and it's all rainbows and butterflies and unicorns and no problems.
Yeah.
If there's a problem, tell the candidate it's okay. Like that problem could be an opportunity for that candidate, right? Okay, they've had some turnover, but there's a new manager. They realized they were doing XYZ wrong. They're fixing it now. you could be the beneficiary of whatever was going wrong previously.
100%.
Here's something to throw out to the listener is everything that Sonny's bringing up now, Noel and I talked about previously. This dates back 20 some odd years where recruiters at the time were very shady.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you did everything you could to close a deal so you can collect a commission check. And we chose a different path. So what you're all living through right now, where you have access to the internet and Glassdoor, and maybe you have a friend that works somewhere and you can connect to them through social media. We were delivering that insight years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're trying to get across on this podcast, future podcast, the three previous ones, is that if you choose to be in this field, choose the right path. Be transparent, deliver as much information as you can, cleanly and clear. And like Sonny said, let them make their decision that impacts their career and their family's well-being, right? You don't want to go to bed at night knowing that you screwed somebody out of a healthy paycheck someday.
Yeah, just for a nickel, right?
Yeah, right. There'll be a next one. So this is my closing, guys, to my candidates who are kind of wavering and accepting the offer. And it's a true story and it's factual. Sonny, I understand you're on not sure about taking this job. I just want to say something. I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but one way or another, we're going to fill this role. The question is this the right career path for you? Right? So you let them know that, hey, I'm taking the pressure off because I know I'm going to fill this role anyways, but are you making the right decision for you and your family? And so we've been practicing this for over 20 years and it feels great, you know?
So let's talk about recruiters we've met and managed and mentored over the course of our careers. Let's talk about what does make a successful recruiter. I toyed with the idea of what makes a great recruiter. Great's subjective, I guess. Successful, well, respected and such. First of all, Alex, tell me about the last or first recruiter you hired who had a college degree in recruiting. Go. Ooh.
Yeah, none. I don't have to think too long.
So have you seen, and this is, an open forum, we're not doing cheat sheets here. Have you seen a particular subset of people, whether it's, college grads? I've heard some companies say they like to hire Division I college athletes for recruiting roles. I've heard, recently I've been, put into networks with veterans and military spouses. I've heard people say teachers can actually make great recruiters. Alex, what have you seen in your career? If you've seen people come from other industries or come from non-traditional routes, where are those people coming from? Where do you find the best recruiters?
Oh, brother, you know what? I rarely check their academic background, but I think the best recruiters, people that I really enjoy being around, where I learn the most, is people who have some strong street smarts, like the book of life.
Sure. Yeah,
it's nice to be educated and have all that information, and it does come in useful, but just the book of life. Yeah.
Yeah. And to build upon that, Alex, I agree with you, by the way. We have a recruiter on my team who joined us about a year ago. I think it was on his 1 year anniversary. Retired Marine, never been a recruiter before a year ago, but 30 years in the Marine Corps, has a lot of, I call it relatability, Alex, like you're talking about. Can talk about family and his wife and his kids and coaching his kids and travels around the world. And like, there's a lot of, likability and just a depth of experiences. Cause it's never a checklist of conversation. It's building a relationship with a candidate or building a relationship with a hiring manager. So you got to be able to, trade stories or talk about different things.
So let me flip this on both of you, because I've had the pleasure of working with people from various different backgrounds in recruiting. I've been part of interview panels for recruiters, but I haven't gone out and hired them and trained them. I know both of you have. So reverse the tables a little bit. Where have you seen successes? Does it matter what their academic background is? Does it matter if they've ever went to college?
I cheat. I hire people from tech because I know they've been trained.
Sure.
Tech, what do you mean?
from tech systems or places like that, right? Places where I know that they train college grads very well. And I always looked at it and I've told probably the last 10 recruiters I've hired that were junior, man, I wish I could have worked for me when I was your age. Because when I was that age, it was that very siloed, simple, you couldn't do that, can't do this, you can't network here, can't talk to these people. And I had to wait till I was 27, 28 to figure out that you could do all these things, that you could talk to other people outside of your company and network and broaden your network and go find people anywhere you want. So I like to find folks that have a little experience. So I always retrain the nuts and bolts of what to do and how to do it. But I give them the kind of the advanced version right off the bat and do it that way. I haven't hired anybody that hadn't had experience before, though.
Nobody, not even coming over from a different industry, no. When you put your time at, related, but in your time at Trustwave, for example, I know you mentored and trained, maybe not totally green, but junior-ish folks.
Yeah.
What did you see in those people? Because you and I have had conversations about some of those folks. We don't have to mention their names here, but you're like, she's great. He's great. What made them great?
There's a few things that you have to have, right? Yep. You absolutely have to be a hard worker. You have to have an amazing work ethic because this is not a 9-to-5 job ever. I mean, in my opinion, you're always available. When I was at Aerotech, a guy I hired called me at 4 a.m, told me he wasn't going to show up. I called the manager. He's like, call the company. Tell him he's not going to be there. So at 4 a.m, I'm making a phone call, right? So you kind of have to be you have to be willing to do a lot from a work standpoint, right? It's not constant. I'm not, digging a hole for 10, 12 hours a day, 8 hours a day, whatever it is. But, technology makes us available all the time. So you absolutely have to have the work ethic. I do think you have to be, as Alex said, street smart. I think my take on the street smart piece is part of our job is trying to figure out how much of the truth people are telling us. As much as I think that, or as much as I'm transparent with candidates, they're not always 100% transparent with us, right? Sometimes they're trying to do whatever they can to get the job because they want or need the job.
Right.
So that street smarts, being able to pick up on people, ask the right questions, those kind of things.
Yeah. Sometimes wish candidates would, I know this is a utopian view of it, but that they would be as transparent with us,
right.
Like the three of us, as I'm saying we should be with them, right? To say, here's the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let me know if this works. That they could also do the same for us. In fact, I tell candidates, especially on the perm hiring side, where the person's going to go work for a company, they're not going to come work for us necessarily. Mm-hmm. I tell them, I'm your advocate. I'm getting our paycheck is, our fee is coming from the client, but I'm your advocate. It's in my best interest to, put you in the best light, get you the best offer I can get for you within market or, whatever. Like I have no reason to get you a lowball offer or squeeze. Like, tell me what I need to know so I can do my job and I'll tell you what you need to know. Let's not play these games back and forth. But
I think one of the taglines for consulting when I was a consultant was I'm the advocate for the candidate and the client. It was basically what it was.
Right.
Something to that effect, right? Because you have to be, it's, as Alex said before, it's someone's career is way too important to them and their livelihood and their family that you can't just treat it as a tick on your checklist for the day or commission check or anything else. You got to treat it seriously. It's important.
Right.
Well, I also think that's what makes it fun, right? When you're taking that approach, you're having fun, you're building relationships. I can't tell you how many times to this day, I'll hang up the phone, ask and get a referral. Hey, I'm not interested. I'm not a fit. Great. Who do you know? And you're not going to refer somebody with your name on it unless you feel comfortable. And I'm not doing this just to gain their trust and that's my game plan, but that's just who I am. And you guys know that, right? We network amongst each other all the time. I think I mentioned this on a previous podcast, listener, is that most of my jobs, contracts, relationships that I've gotten has been through the network. Sonny, when I worked for you at Trustwave, it was through the network. I think that's really when we started to kind of know each other better, is about that role.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we met earlier on through Noel, but that was when we actually started to hang out. Yeah.
Another character trait.
When my other work friend introduced me.
Another character trait that I think is important is whatever you want to call it, thick skin, resilience, something to that effect. In a listener, you're going to find out that this can be a very frustrating career. It could certainly be rewarding. That's why we're doing this podcast. That's why we've been doing it a long time. But you're going to get a lot of no's. You're going to get a lot of, people not interested. You may have to talk to 50 people to 100 people to get one hire. And that's just you may have 99 great conversations. It's not like, 99 people are hanging up on you. This isn't, we're not, selling, a car warranty insurance or something. We're providing an opportunity for somebody to better their life. It's a professional call. This isn't a call center, but you may have to talk to 100 people and you may get down on yourself over the course of a week, 2 weeks. Like, I don't understand what's going on. I call people, they don't call me back. I send emails, they don't call me back. Or Sonny, I don't know if I'll be paraphrasing, but one of the hardest parts about our business are the people. We're in a people business and people sometimes can disappoint you. It's not like we're, going to grab a loaf of bread off the shelf. We have to find a person and talk to them about this opportunity. And even hopefully no one on this, who's listening sees this happen to them, but you'll take somebody to the finish line. They accept the offer. They give a 2 weeks notice. Monday, December 1st rolls around and there's nobody walking through the front door. And you're like, where? What? He or she was
no show.
He was super excited about the job. Like, I don't understand. Like, all the signals were there. They told the manager, yes, they signed on the dotted line and never showed up. So it can be frustrating. So resilience or thick skin, whatever you want to call it.
And perseverance along with that, because 25 years, I've gone through stages. Like, I was excited about it. I had a chip on my shoulder. I wanted to be great. I was going to beat everyone. I was going to be the best recruiter in the world. Sold, got into it for a while. It's exactly 15 years ago because my wife was pregnant with my older son. And I used to, all of that started to get to me, right? People backing out, all that, not trusting people. I became very cynical, skeptical of people. And I used to whisper, like, you talk to the belly when your wife's pregnant. And I'd be like, you could be anything you want when you grow up, except a recruiter.
I believe it. I believe it.
I swear to God.
I believe it. That's you.
But back then, it's different. The last 8-10 years, I'm having a blast again. Like, it's fun. I think the biggest thing too is it's been recruiting, where Noel and I have always said this, and I think Alex, you'll agree. We probably even talked about it. A lot of times when you're in the staffing world, it's really not recruiting. It's a lot of matching. Like, you get lucky. I have a job for this.
Yep.
I found a guy who's looking for a job who can do this job. I match him up and they get the job. But the last 10 years for me, it's been everybody's working, find the best person for the job, and actually convince them to come and work for my company, even though they don't need a job. Right? That, to me, that's recruiting. That's the part of it that I'm really have the most fun with.
Right.
And it's also the rite of passage, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're just starting out in this industry, listener, with a background in some kind of sales or whatever, great. If you're not, good for you as well. Just start, right? Like we talked about before, is you have to go through those pains to get to where we are today, where we're having a blast. We're having fun. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe we're having more fun with it today than we did 25 years ago because we have more technology. We have more accessibility, right? We used to call into phone numbers where the phone just rang and rang and rang and rang. Then they came up with a thing called voice caller ID. So we've gone through all these challenges. Now you can text the candidate, you can email them, you can find them on Facebook,
DMs.
So what we talked about earlier is that the game has changed a little bit. The work ethic hasn't.
Yeah.
So if you think you're going to get into this and make $200,000 a year by just showing up, it ain't going to happen. Okay. Will you have to make 100 phone calls? Absolutely. But the cool thing about that is that's 100 relationships. It's not just a phone call. If you're smart about it, you're building a database, you're building a network, You're making them part of your social media. So I think the tables guys have churned a little bit with the industry. Maybe it has more people like us in it who are having fun and teaching fun again.
Yeah.
I think it's a good time to be a recruiter and build a career out of it for yourself.
I had a former colleague say that you need to be smart, but not too smart. I don't know if I mentioned it yet, but I don't know if I entirely agree with that.
You got to be able to play dumb.
you may have to play dumb. Yeah, you may have to, because especially in our particular field in IT and technology, you will turn a candidate or a manager off by trying to pretend like you know what they do for a living. The reality is, I'm a smart guy. Sonny's a smart guy. Alex is smart. Our friend Randy, who's got an engineering degree, is smart. There's lots of smart people who are recruiters. But we don't know. I couldn't tell you a line of Java if you showed it to me. I couldn't pick it out of I have no idea.
Yeah.
So don't pretend to know. But yeah, be smart, but not too smart. But on the flip side, my brother, Chris, God love him, he wasn't book smart, but he was what Alice said. He was very street smart, very affable, built great relationships with everybody that he met. So you do have to have, some sense of smart. So smarts, resiliency. I think it's an under-mentioned quality to be open to learn. One of the things that I have done till today, I'm still, I don't purport to know everything about, everything. So I'm still attending webinars every week. I still read electronic recruiting exchange articles about, what time of day to send emails, get the best, what subject line gets the best responses. Like, I'm always learning. Don't ever stop learning. Would you agree? Disagree?
Absolutely. I think so too. And I think it comes that also not only in the nuts and bolts of recruiting, but it comes in handy when you're talking to candidates. You get one of the things they taught us at Aerotech that I still do today is if it's something new, and there's always new technology coming out, I would find people that I didn't think they wanted my job, but I knew they knew the technology, and I would just call them and talk to them about what they do.
Right.
Tell me about what you do. And if you get the right person, which is most technology professionals, they love to talk about what they do.
Right.
And they would tell you everything about it. And you start to learn at least, again, not enough. I used to tell candidates, you could put 3 screens in front of me with Java, Python, and C#, and I couldn't tell you which was which. Right. But you start to learn some of the bigger picture stuff that you want to know from people, what they did on projects, what their role was. Right. And for me, I used to get asked all the time by candidates if I was a Java programmer, and I have no clue, none whatsoever. But it was just because of all that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's even just telling the candidate, I have no idea what's going on. Like, again, be honest, be transparent. Like, in fact, I would ask candidates, let's say I knew a little bit about something. I'd say, so tell me, this client is asking for Java with XYZ. How do those two relate? Like, and I see you've worked with it on your resume. How do those two relate? Like, what's the connection there? And again, like you said, Sonny, the candidates enjoy, as much as this is a passion for us recruiting, their career is a passion for them. Like, we used to joke that if you came across a network engineer and they didn't have their own setup at home, right? They hadn't built servers and had 7 laptops broken down, sitting on a shelf somewhere, and had their own mesh network, and they probably didn't love it, right? They probably didn't love it as much as,
The smartest guy I ever worked for that I hired engineers for, I had a part of my G2 or whatever you want to call my info sheet that I would give him when I submitted a candidate to him. Obviously, all the normal stuff you had to have on there, but he always wanted to know, what are they reading right now? What are they reading right now?
Right.
It was always about that. What are they trying to learn to get better, to do what's next?
Yep. Alex, anything to say about that?
Yeah, I actually kind of agree a little bit with both of you. More leaning towards Sonny's side in his first statement is that I'm more of a visual learner. I enjoy talking to these candidates, and I'm upfront, like said, hey, I don't know this rec or this role is new to me. I understand fundamentally what it is, but help me visualize this role through your chair. Like, what do you do? And I got to tell you, 9 times out of 10, if I'm screening 7 candidates, I can pretty much pinpoint who's going to get the job based on how well they taught me. And that's a great feeling. That's the best part I enjoy about learning. Reading articles and all that stuff is, for me, okay. But it's these deep conversations that help me get into the root of the business.
Yeah. Quick callback to playing dumb. Sometimes I did know some stuff, and then I would still pretend like I didn't to see how much they knew it.
Sure.
Can
I ask you why, Sonny?
What?
Like, why go to that level? I think we said this earlier. So if you're going to try to know everything about everything, unless you specialize or just stay in Java, okay, great. That path is, I agree with 100%. But in the world I live in, I'm very diverse.
Yeah.
Does it matter to take that deep dive to see if they're lying to you or how much they really know? How does that help your submittal or your hire?
It wasn't
if you're presenting
look, it was a piece of a conversation, right? It wasn't 25 minutes of the call, right? It was me confirming what I saw on paper. And sometimes you don't have the best feeling for someone and you want to hear them say it, right? Sometimes their resume is a little, not the best written or doesn't really clearly state the background experience they have. And you have to get that stuff out of the conversation. And if it's, there's other ways to do it, but that was the Columbo, because I'm going to age myself, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows who Columbo is. But that's
a lot of totally related. I always say, give me the Reader's Digest version, and I see people's eyes gloss over. Like, Reader's Digest version, yeah. But on the topic of kind of knowing your subject matter, I would say that a good recruiter, a successful recruiter, probably can recruit. This is my personal opinion. You guys can agree, disagree. Can recruit anything. Like I think if I started in January of 2023 to go recruit doctors, I could recruit doctors. No big deal. I would need to learn some things, but recruiting is 90% of the job, 85, 90% of the job is recruiting. It's building relationships. It's understanding things. But in that last little piece is understanding the subject matter. In our case, IT, I didn't know what DevOps was 3 years ago. I didn't know what FinOps was a year ago. Technologies are always changing. Things that were hot, Ruby on Rails was hot for a while. Nobody uses it now. Mainframe kind of comes and goes. But I do think you should have, if you are going to specialize, you should know something. Yeah. So if you're a technology recruiter, there's some good books. I'll put some links in the show notes that are out on Amazon. It's basically a technology handbook for recruiters. It'll give you a very high level view of what's a network, what are the software programming languages at a high level, what do they do, what's object oriented analysis and design and so on. The other thing I'd say is one approach I have kind of stumbled into it was, and I'll be giving away a pro tip here, so hopefully there's no candidates listening who are later on are going to be like, oh, you use that on me. But one thing I'll do is if I'm talking to a candidate who has a new technology or something I don't quite know a lot about, I'll reference that I typically recruit on a different thing. So, and again, the way I say I stumbled into this is our previous company did a lot of SAP work. Sonny, as you know, we worked together there, a lot of SAP work. Yep. Right? Then I'm talking to candidates who have Oracle experience, and Alice, you worked at Oracle. It's related things, but totally two different companies. So when I started calling candidates for Oracle, I didn't want to seem like a dummy, right? I've been doing this 20 years. I should know something. But I would preface my conversation with an Oracle DBA or an Oracle Hyperion person. I'd say, hey, look, before I start asking these questions, I need you to understand I'm usually an SAP recruiter. Like I focus on SAP. What I felt that gave me was a stamp of validation that I was a good senior recruiter. I just didn't happen to do the thing you're doing. So excuse me if I don't know all the vernacular and all this stuff. So again, I stumbled into it. But now I tell my new recruiters, I got 4 of them with all less than a year of experience or thereabouts. I'm like, don't be afraid to ask a candidate about XYZ. Just tell them you typically recruit on ABC. Tell me about XYZ. And even for the recruiter, it seems to take some weight off their shoulders that they don't have to know everything.
And it helps build that relationship. I've had many people, various different levels at the C level as well, appreciate the fact that I was transparent. It opened up a whole different level of conversation from that point.
What do you guys think about the character trait or the character's not the right word, the work ethic trait of being organized? I've seen some recruiters be very organized. I've seen, don't want to keep bringing up my brother, but very disorganized.
I think you have to be organized, obviously. I mean, you could really get lost. I'm notoriously terrible recorder of notes and data in the system. I always could remember stuff and I write on paper like an old person.
Yep.
And then I would translate, some of my notes into there. But you have to be able to do that. And I rag on my team all the time because they don't do it, which is probably hypocritical. Look, you have to be able to organize your day. Otherwise, you can get lost very quickly,
right?
Especially if you have a huge rec load. Maybe a ton of recs to work on and you're not planning your day out to say,
yep,
I'm going to go in and look at all my applicants. After I get through that, I'm going to make cold calls and send emails on this rec, and I'm going to move to this one because I've got these people in process and I got all this following up to do. If you don't have a plan and get yourself organized, and I don't think there's one way to do it. There's different ways to do it, but you have to have that organization. You have to have that plan.
And actually, not to totally cut you off, but that's next week's episode is talking about how you plan your day. I heard this term a long time ago. Plan your work your plan, right? The night before you leave, you plan your work for the next day. When you get in the morning, work your plan. Don't deviate from it. Don't get off it. But, we'll discuss some best practices from the three of us on next week's podcast on that particular topic. But so organization kind of comes and goes, right? Some people have it. Some people don't. I mean, my brother used to keep, you'd think he was, one of these, like a serial killer, all these little notebooks filled with scribble, scratch, and candidate phone numbers. And he'd be like, oh, what was that candidate's name? And he's flipping back through.
Yeah.
That was the notebook from January. I'm like, what? That's not
I got a file drawer in one of my filing cabinets with that's notebooks.
See, on the flip side, Alex, I know from my conversation with you take copious notes, but I think they're all electronic, right? Like you're not sitting around notes, but you're versus Sonny, who's trying to kind of remember it all. You document everything, right?
I do. I do keep a notebook still, but that's where I take notes like salary negotiations with the manager, things that I need to kind of action and then get rid of, right? They don't stay recorded. But in 2006, and a huge shout out to, I think we all know him, Carlton Gates. When I worked with him at Accenture, funny story, I used to go home with my laptop and all my folders full of candidate data just in case I didn't come in the next day or, whatever. I wanted all that stuff with me. So went back and forth with my backpack for months. And I showed up one day and I'm unpacking. He goes, dude, what is that? I'm like, well, it's my record, this and that. He goes, no. And he showed me how he kept everything in a spreadsheet. So back then, because it was, 06, we're still kind of ramping up the tools and technology. He was using a spreadsheet. From there, guys, I have evolved that when I do a screen, I put on my calendar in Outlook, and that's where I take my notes. So because I know that if the server crashes or my computer crashes, that stuff will always be stored somewhere and I can recover it. So I can go back and look up notes from, months ago by just in my Outlook pulling up the candidate. And then what happens, it's really cool. If you are truly keeping an ATS system, and I know we're talking about that in the future, is that I can just copy and paste those notes. So it just takes a lot of extra admin time off my table, which I just hate extra admin time. It took a little while to kind of get used to it, but I don't know how else I would function without it ever again.
Well, it also helps to not, I joke with our recruiters that the applicant tracking system should be your brain and your memory. So you don't have to try to remember what was that person's name or what was that thing we talked about. Just do a quick search in our database and you'll find that candidate and find that.
And actually tell the candidate, excuse me, one more thing. I actually sometimes stop the candidate, excuse me, give me a second to catch up with my notes. And they hear me typing away. Sure. They're like, hey, I can hear you typing away. I'm like, hey, don't want to lose any of this information. So no shame in admitting that you're taking good notes. Again, helps with that building that relationship.
Sure. Alex, the topic was what makes a good recruiter or what makes a successful recruiter. What do you want to add to that we haven't talked about before we start talking about, I don't know, some, if we're going to talk about good things, let's talk about some bad things too. But have we covered all the good things from your perspective?
Yeah, I think so. To answer your question, I'm going to side with both of you. Work ethic, and I know we all work on that every day, is critical. And then loving to be around people and learning and just having fun with your day. The money will come. But I couldn't agree with you guys more, is that if you really don't come in and have a purpose for that day, it's like watching paint dry. It's just horrible.
Yeah, I think even just having the view of the job and the view of the profession, that it's a positive thing, that you're, making good things happen for other people, that you're enjoying your job, that can make the difference between, look, previous to getting into this industry, I don't know if we talked about this before, but, I worked for a uniform rental company and had to brave the cold in the winter and the heat in the summer and dirty places that I would deliver uniforms to. And hey, look, I now get to sit in a professional setting in an office. It's air conditioned in the summer and heated in the winter. I'm not swinging a hammer. I can eat lunch with my colleagues and OSHA compliant or whatever you want to call it. Like, it's not the hardest job.
No, physically, it's not hard at all.
No, not hard at all.
I have one more that
go ahead, knock it out.
And it's so rudimentary and it seems so simple, but you'd be surprised how many people don't have it. You got to be able to listen. I mean, being around people and talking to people and asking questions, you have to actually sincerely want to know what they're saying. Otherwise, you won't get it.
Right.
My initial calls with candidates have evolved to where I don't really even talk the first 10 or 15 minutes. I ask a couple of really broad questions to people. They start going and I just let them go. If I feel like they're sputtering, I'm listening. I'll put something out there for them to kind of pick them back up. But I just try to get candidates talking as much as I can. It does two things, right? It makes people feel important, and it is important, right? Not fake importance. But I also learn a lot about people before I tell them what I want to know, right? So you get the truth from folks, right? So if it's a job that's going to do X, Y, and Z, and I tell someone, hey, I want you to come here and do X, Y, and Z. What do you want to do? I want to do X, Y, and Z, right? For you guys, right? So you get that first 10, 15, 20 minutes of a candidate just spilling their guts, honestly, in the right way, right? It's, they want to talk and they want to go to it. So but you have to sincerely listen to that time. You cannot be sending an email to somebody else or thinking about what you're going to ask next, those stupid things. You got to be able to sincerely want to know what these candidates are doing.
That last part of you, I agree with everything you said. That last part I think is key. A lot of us do it. I know I'm guilty of it. We do this personally. As recruiters, we'll do this professionally, which is you ask a question. You don't even listen to the answer because you're thinking of the next question, right? Especially for us as recruiters, we have a checklist or a G2 or a script. We're gathering intel. So we ask a question. We listen for the first sentence that gives us the answer. The candidate wants to keep talking, but our brain has already moved on to when can you interview or what is your compensation? They haven't finished. Like, give them the chance to answer the question before you move on, listen to what they have to say, right? And the other things, so, the listening piece is interesting, Sonny, because I thought about this too with our team that I have here is also listen to others. And obviously you're listening to this podcast. So I think you hopefully would be a good listener in this respect, which is listen and learn. There's a lot of information out there. You'll get it here at the podcast. You'll get it from colleagues and coworkers. Don't be the person who is, stuck in their ways or has their own view of things. And look, it's not bad to have a different view, but if I'm telling you something as a colleague, a mentor, a manager, I've been doing this 25 years. Like, this isn't, we're not building rocket ships here. It's been done this way for 25 years. And, there are tweaks, there are different things that change, but follow the format. The format. So any closing thoughts, Alex, on, downsides to you seeing in recruiters or?
No, it kind of all ties together. If you don't have some of the pluses and things we've been talking about today, it's going to be a long road for you. I mean, you don't have to be the biggest cheerleader out there, but like Sonny said, you just said, listening is important. I view listening as an opportunity to take good notes and remind that candidate during my close potentially, or maybe something they say are more applicable to another job I'm working on. That's happened to me. So listening more than talking is important because that information is good inside information that you can share with the hiring manager. You said it best earlier, Noel. You're their ambassador, right? You're their kind of the mothership to the opportunity they're looking for. Downside really for me is, again, going back to what we've been saying, I think on every podcast listener, is integrity. If you don't have integrity and you're kind of shady and you're all about yourself and you're not willing to help others, you and I probably won't work well together. That's the people I like working with. Those are the type of people I think that teach me and learn from me. But being shady is just a big no-no for me. Everything else, like we can teach you everything else. I can't teach you the book of life. So that's really the only big sticking point for me.
And the community is not that small. I mean, sorry, not that large. You know, especially with LinkedIn, proliferation of LinkedIn, everybody can do a backdoor reference check on you. Everybody sees, oh, you worked at XYZ. I know Joey worked over at XYZ. Let me call him and see what you did there. And if you're that recruiter who has a bad reputation, your opportunities will be limited. You're going to have to end up leaving recruiting to go mow lawns or sell cars or something. So
it won't be overnight. It'll be just one of those things where it's just going to follow you. And all of a sudden you just become a target.
Right.
It's okay to have a couple of specs on it. Listen, if we all said on these podcasts that we've been successful at 8 players everywhere we worked, it wouldn't be true because, you know, there's some opportunities work out, some don't. And it took me a long time to really appreciate that as a learning opportunity, because then I use that to become better in my next environment. And that goes with even being successful. I always want to learn things that I don't do well so I can keep working on it. But like Noel said, may not happen right away, but it's going to catch up with you. It's okay to make mistakes. It really is, but just don't become a bullseye. Just you can have some spots here and there. It's okay.
Right.
It's just my personal read on that. You know, everybody deserves a break and to learn from failing.
Sonny, closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts or something negative?
How about both? Get negative and close it out.
Yeah.
I've been sitting here ignoring what Alex is saying and thinking about what negative thing I'm going to say. No. I will say
the listening part.
The one thing that will create a lot of issues for you as a recruiter is an inability or a fear to have difficult conversations with people. If you can't call someone and tell them they didn't get the job or tell them they bombed an interview or those things or have a difficult conversation about what someone wants from a comp standpoint, you won't last very long, right? Nobody wants to ding a candidate. Nobody wants to give them bad news. Nobody wants to be that person, but it's part of it. And some of the best conversations I've actually had as a recruiter were rejecting people because they're so surprised at times that I actually called them to tell them that we end up talking for 15, 20 minutes. And, you know, that person next time, 3 months later, if he's still looking, he's pinging me, or when I reach out to that person, I get a referral from them, right? They know that, it's not all sunshine and rainbows when you do this too, right? Most people don't get the job you're recruiting at, right?
Yep.
So there's a lot of tough
conversations. Does that come naturally to you, or do you have to work on that?
It's not easy. It's not. I try to work at it. I think it really got easy the first time somebody was like, hey man, thanks for calling to tell me.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
I remember the first time that happened to me where the person was like, I just really appreciate you called me. Yeah. After I hung up the phone, I thought to myself, wow, the bar is low for recruiters. All I had to do was call the candidate back to reject them. And now I'm better than every other recruiter they dealt with over the past 6 months, even though I rejected them. Now I play stupid when I call somebody and have to let them down and deliver the bad news. And again, on their side, they're like, oh, I just really appreciate you didn't ghost me and disappear. You were considerate of the fact that I spent, hours in your process, and you're giving me feedback that'll help me improve next time, blah, blah. And I always play stupid. I go, what? Doesn't every recruiter call you? They don't, that's not right. If they don't call you, that's not right. Why would you deal with them? But yeah.
One word of warning to the listener, though. You will still get some people who aren't too happy when you call them
100%.
Tell them they didn't get the job. So they're not all filled to pieces.
And if there's any listener out there who was a candidate that I didn't call back,
or me,
I'm sitting here talking about, like, you should always follow up. Look, I'm sure there's someone out there who's like, Noel never called me back. I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
It could have happened, but
25 years, but
the goal is to follow up. The goal is to not ghost.
Yeah.
I think we should pick up on this at some point because, you can call, but I've been in an environment for the last, let's just say 7 years where the rejection comes through the system because they want it stamped, they want it recording. And it's based on the sheer volume of recs that we were working on. Even recently, it's impossible for me to call 50 people back because the volume is so high. So we rely on the ATH system. And where I'm going with this is, listener, if you're out there and I haven't called or reached out to you, there are notable glitches. I won't mention which it is, but the reverse has happened where I've messaged a candidate saying, hey, I'd like to talk to you. Resume, fits our job. And they never replied until I called them and they said, what messages? I'm like, well, the last 3 emails I sent you through the ATS. So understand that it's not always the recruiter's fault, but yes, we will definitely build on this because it's something that I've always tried to work on. That's why I asked you that question, Sonny. Yeah. And it comes naturally to you. Would you work on it?
And it's not, obviously, there's a certain point in the process that somebody gets a call, right? It's not every single person you talk to.
Right. All right, gents, wrapping it up. Episode 4 in the books. Look forward to episode 5 next week, where we will talk about some best practices around staying organized and how to plan your day and work to be successful with organization. Thanks a lot. Talk to you guys later. See ya.
Bye.
Bye now.